smell of death is everywhere, and everyone is just wanting to die. Those were the exact words of the UNRWA chief regarding the conditions in Gaza. He described a deteriorating humanitarian situation where dead bodies are under the rubbles or laid out on the streets. Israeli bombardments have persisted in northern Gaza for 3 weeks, with the Jabalia refugee camp having been attacked for almost 18 consecutive days. As the global attention redirects towards Lebanon and the Israeli-Iran conflict, Israel is intensifying its strikes on Gaza, violating international humanitarian law and adding to its record of war crimes. The UN has reported that the war has set back the development in Gaza by as much as 69 years, while the poverty rate in the Palestinian territories has doubled to 74% this year alone. What fate awaits the people of Gaza? What will post-war Gaza look like? And when will the bloodshed stop? These are the questions we're going to be asking here on In Depth. Welcome. While Gazans can barely survive under intensive bombing, the Commissioner General of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, Philippe Lazzarini, has described the toll of 3 weeks of non-stop Israeli bombardment on northern Gaza. The Guardian drew attention to the head of UNRWA's concerns about the dire situation in Gaza. According to the newspaper, Lazzarini called for an immediate truce in northern Gaza, even if just for a few hours, to enable Palestinian families to flee safely without being killed by Israeli bombardment.
Israel has continued its siege for the northern Gaza Strip, destroying homes, preventing the entry of food supplies, and forcing citizens to move. Local health authorities report that emergency services are struggling to reach casualties trapped under rubble or stranded on roads, as Israeli occupation forces continue to obstruct the movement of ambulance and civil defense crews. The United Nations top aid official said recently that Palestinians are living through unspeakable horrors in the north of the Gaza Strip, calling for an end to the ongoing atrocities. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Israel to press Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on increasing aid to Gaza Strip. The U.S. officials warned that Israeli actions were causing conditions there to rapidly deteriorate. If these actions are not reversed, the U.S. may withhold some of its military support. Furthermore, the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency called for a temporary truce to allow people to leave areas of northern Gaza, as health services are running critically low in supplies for treating the injured. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of the UNRWA, said the humanitarian situation has reached a dire point, with bodies abandoned by roadsides or buried under rubble. He added that Israel is continuing to prevent humanitarian missions from reaching northern Gaza with critical supplies, including food and medicine. As war rages on, the UN has reported that over 60,000 people have been displaced, with Israeli occupation forces intensifying their aggression and exacerbating one of the most severe humanitarian crises in the region.
To help us analyze the current situation, we're joined by Ines Abdurrezek, the co-director of the Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy, and Ratib Natche, member of the Palestinian National Action Committee from the occupied Jerusalem. Thank you both for joining us. First, let's start off with Ms. Abdurrezek. Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of the UNRWA, described the situation in northern Gaza as one where people are just waiting to die. How has the Israeli military action caused such a dire situation to unfold, and is this something that can be reversed at this point in time?
Thank you for having me. What you just referred as Israeli military action is in fact genocide. I think it can be called otherwise, and I think what's happening in the northern Gaza makes it even clearer that Israel has no intention to stop its genocide. And what does this mean? Genocide means the intention and also the action to kill an entire people for who they are. So it's not about, killing individuals or armed people. We know we are way, way, way beyond that. Besieging an entire population, preventing water, food, electricity from coming in. This is an ongoing Nakba on the Palestinian people, and it's clear genocidal intentions and acts that are going to continue, and that Israel has made it clear now that it is wanting to pursue. So this is the situation we're in now.
So do you think, if I could follow up there, do you think that there is a possibility that, the international community could somehow stop what's happening in Gaza right now? As you've described it, it is genocidal, and what's happening right now is quite dire, and especially in the north of Gaza. Do you think the international community has a role to play in stopping what's happening right now?
Of course, they could. They could have a long time ago. The United States provides billions in military aids, billions in military equipment to Israel. The U.S. has the power to stop this. The U.S. and the allies that are also not putting pressure neither on the U.S. or Israel to stop this. So yes, of course, the international community could be pressuring. They could stop fueling that genocide, whether it's through their military aid, military trade, energy trade. So there is a lot of leverage that states have that they have not been using. Paying lip service to peace, paying lip service to ceasefire is absolutely of no use when Israel is ignoring international law. It's ignoring even its own allies' statements. It's ignoring, it's drunk on impunity. It has a total impunity for now decades. And so the only way to stop this is to put immense pressure on Israel, which we know the Biden administration is not ready to do.
Okay, if we could move to Ms. Natche, Philippe Lazzarini has called for an immediate truce to allow for the passage of humanitarian aid. Can you tell us more about the Israeli blockade right now in the north that has prevented aid from reaching those in need? There are reports that the WHO has, for instance, stopped its polio vaccination programs there due to a lack of safety. Do you think a pause, a humanitarian pause, is something that is possible, and is it going to be useful if it's just a few days?
I think that Israel didn't have the will or really want to let the humanitarian aid enter North Gaza. Even if they say that they are not implementing the general plan in North Gaza, but what it is in reality and what we see and witness during the last 18 days says that they are using starvation to kill people and to force them to leave their homes to the south of Gaza. And even this transfer is not safe enough. And I think that they are putting people under not just a siege, but a belt of fire during these 18 days, willing to kill anyone who is trying to find a source of food or water. Even they use the water tanks to pump them and to put military pumping factors in these water tanks. So when people even seek the water or the humanitarian aid, they will be pumped and killed. So I think that a military who are acting in this way, not willing to let any humanitarian aid enter to north of Gaza before they end their plan and transfer as much as they could from the people out of there. I hear that Blinken in his visit suggested like a week or a week and a half of a humanitarian or fire case. So the humanitarian aid will be implemented in North Gaza, but till this moment, the Israeli side refused to let these humanitarian aid enter to the north of Gaza, and they are putting tens of women in a hole and killing and shooting anyone who are trying to leave even to the north without the structures that the Israeli put on the people there.
Okay, Ms. Abdulaziz, we talked right now about Blinken's visit generally to the Middle East. It's the 11th visit here to attempt to say that there is a ceasefire. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is pushing for what he says is a ceasefire through an ongoing tour in the Middle East. You also spoke about the idea that the U.S., along with other partners, are funding what's happening right now in Gaza. Do you think that this is a real push for a ceasefire, or is it just another round of, let's pretend that we're going to go for a ceasefire and not really actually pressure the Israeli side to do anything about it?
Yeah, it's kind of pretending, but they have like a legal cause why they are asking for ceasefire and the humanitarian aid in North Gaza, because they didn't want to put the American or the state of America as a partner in this genocide, and they want to show that they are still an international player and they are pushing for this humanitarian aid and situation, and they are not willing to be a part of this genocide. On the other hand, the military aids, unended military aids, it's implemented to Israel to be the tools that they are used to kill those people in Gaza, and yes, to continue these military actions.
Okay, if I could ask the same question to Ms. Abdulaziz, if you could tell us a bit, what do you think of this tour? Do you think it's going to be some sort of success, or is it just another media tour basically to justify actions and funding of what the Israeli army is actually doing on the ground?
No, I think it's absolutely the second one, that it's deception, it's diplomatic and political tactics to continue the genocide, to continue creating facts on the ground, to continue destroy, to continue fragment Palestinians. We've seen that before, paying lip service to peace negotiations, to peace processes. Now it's paying lip service to ceasefire negotiations. But let's look at the facts. The U.S. has vetoed UN resolutions, 3 of them, before it sort of supported some sort of ceasefire. And then it continued in August. It sent additional billions of military equipment to Israel, while tens of thousands of Palestinians were already dead, and half of Gaza already destroyed. And now what they're doing is, they've sent this letter saying, okay, if you don't, increase the humanitarian aid in 30 days, we will reconsider the military aid. But again,
so you think this is a way for the US basically to wash their hands of the actions taking place?
Yes, exactly. They have to say something for several reasons. One, there is the elections upcoming, and the Democratic Party has its electorate that wants a ceasefire. And second, they might be in breach of their own laws. In the US there are laws, and in fact they might be in breach of their own laws by continuing this military aid. So they have to pretend to do something about it. But let's be clear. Hamas, Hezbollah had been very ready, and they had accepted ceasefire deals a long time ago. Israel assassinated the main negotiator of Hamas, Haniyeh. Then they assassinated Sinwar. They assassinated Nasrallah, who had very clearly said if there is a ceasefire accepted by Hamas, they will stop. But Israel is very determined. It's very determined to continue its bombing campaign on Lebanon. It's very determined to continue the genocide on Palestinians. Why? Because again, you have to see this in the historical times. Israel as a project of colonizing the entire land. They want a supremacist Israeli Jewish state. And for that, they understand that the only way for them to do it right now, this project, is to kill Palestinians or to expel Palestinians and ethnically cleanse them. And this is what is happening, live stream on our screens. And the blood is on the leaders of the Western countries that have the power to stop this.
Okay, moving to Ms. Natche, the United Nations now estimates that Gaza's poverty rate is about 74.2%. With that in mind, what do you believe are the long-term implications of a continued Israeli aggression on civilian areas and the Gaza Strip as a whole?
I think it's more than 70% of the people are unemployed. We have, like in Gaza, everything is destroyed, completely destroyed. There is no sources of living in Gaza Strip, except who works for the international organization, maybe. And even though the agricultural lands are destroyed because they are covered with these much of white phosphor and other materials that make it impossible for the land owners to make the agriculture as it was in Gaza. So they destroyed everything: the factories, the schools, the infrastructure. Everything is destroyed. So working in what exactly? So I think that the economic circle in Gaza Strip is completely destroyed, and it needs a very long time to rebuild itself, if it's possible, and that will not be possible until we have a ceasefire at least, and yes, and maybe external help to rebuild what was destroyed during this year in Gaza Strip. I think that the situation is much more than what it's reported in the UN report.
Okay, Ms. Abdurrazik, given the report of the extensive damage to infrastructure and the urgent need for humanitarian aid, how does Israel plan to address allegations of war crimes related to targeting civilian facilities, including what just happened today, where they targeted 3 schools? How are they going to deal with this in the future? Because I'm sure even if there are no consequences right now, it is being tried in the international courts.
So there are two things here. I wish we could rely on international law and its implementation. Unfortunately, we know that there is no mechanism strong enough to implement international law. I will give you an example. The International Court of Justice, in the case of South Africa, gave very clear provisional measures and ordered Israel to stop its genocidal acts. And it also ordered countries to prevent genocide. They didn't. Everyone ignored it. Most of the world ignored it, especially Israel, of course. In the ICC, yes, there are investigations ongoing, but this will take years. They can prosecute individuals, but until now, and after all of the genocidal acts and the genocide that is ongoing, no arrest warrants have been issued against Netanyahu and Gallant. So all of this to say that, unfortunately, I wish we could rely on international law. Israel has been ignoring international law since the day it was created. I mean, let's face it, the Zionist movement and then Israel have been ignoring international law for as long as the state has existed. So unfortunately, they know that they can do that in total impunity. The only thing that can work, we're in a political struggle. Palestinians will not be liberated and free and have their right to self-determination fulfilled without very clear political pressure from the world to understand that Israel's project is to erase Palestinians. When they understand that, I think then their politics should change towards the state of Israel. Because, again...
But isn't that what is happening right now? I'm sorry if I'm cutting you off there, but it's kind of happening right now, given that, this is one of the most well-documented, crimes against humanity happening in the Gaza Strip. It's very documented, mobile phones everywhere. And now Israel has sort of become towards the territory of pariah statehood, with a lot of different countries unhappy with what's happening in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, I hope the tide is turning. A lot of people are with us. A lot of the people are with us, but a lot of governments aren't. And so, unfortunately, I would say that it's not enough. I think the world still has to wake up and change its trade, its diplomatic relationship. All of that has not been cut enough yet. Only very few countries have actually taken bold and steps, and it's just not their moral obligation, it's their legal obligations. And so that needs to happen now, because again, Israel will completely ignore any of their legal obligations, any of international law out there, and they have in the past. We are talking about now in Gaza, they have destroyed a life, they have destroyed universities, schools, water infrastructure, museums, heritage, everything basically to erase the Palestinian people. And this is very clear, like the intent is clear, the facts are there. And they're killing the journalists who are, risking their lives still to make us information, get from northern Gaza right now. And they are killing, basically everyone who's trying to tell the truth. And if they're not killing, they're basically accusing all of the international courts and diplomats to be anti-Semitic or being terrorists themselves. So, we know their ways, we know their methods. They will go all the way to discredit any Palestinian voice, to discredit any Palestinian testimony, and to discredit any international pressure mechanism. So this will not change. The only thing that can change is the way that the international community can understand that if we really want a just peace, and what peace means is justice and rights for
I'm
Palestinians,
sorry if
only
I
happen
cut
with
you off there,
pressure.
but we have some breaking news right now. If you could hold on with us, we bring you some breaking news as the Turkish Interior Minister announces terrorist attacks on TUSA's headquarters in Ankara. The minister reported casualties in attacks on TUSA's headquarters in Ankara, and this is according to Reuters, where explosions, gunfire heard at the Turkish company headquarters based in Ankara. Turkey has said today that a deadly attack was carried out at the headquarters of the Turkish aerospace industries known as TOSA. Near the capital Ankara, and while media reported a loud explosion at the site and showed footage of an exchange of gunfire there. Turkey's Interior Ministry said in an attack on the premises of the defense company left a number of people dead or injured. Ali Yerkaya did not provide further details on the attacks on Turkish aerospace industries in the outskirts of the capital. The cause of the explosion and the subsequent gunfire remains unclear, with some media reports claiming a suicide attack had occurred. Emergency services were dispatched to the site where state-owned Anatolia News Agency had reported this. Television images also showed damaged gates and a nearby clash in the parking lot. TUSAS is one of Turkey's most important defense and aviation companies. It produces Khan, the country's first national combat aircraft, among other projects. And this is footage of the plumes of smoke coming out in Turkey, and we will update you on the situation in Turkey as the news unfolds there. That was breaking news of a possible attack, terrorist attack in a defense company in Turkey. Anyway, back to the ideas here. Back to Ms. Abderreze and Ms. Natche. Thank you for holding on there. Let's get back to Gaza. Ms. Natche, the UN reports shows that shortages of water, food and medical care in Gaza. What steps are being taken to ensure that the humanitarian aid can flow more freely into affected areas in Gaza?
Actually, Israel is controlling everything that is entering to Gaza Strip. They have the only control on these entering of the materials, and even the implementing of these materials in earth or between the people in Gaza. So I think it's still impossible to plan for any humanitarian aid with this situation in Gaza Strip, and it seems sometimes impossible or very difficult to let some aids enter, and when it enter, to make it go in the plan to implement it for the people who need it or really in need for these materials or humanitarian aid. Such in North Gaza, nothing is entering more than 3 weeks ago, since 3 weeks ago till now. And we have like a report that the starvation in North Gaza is in the 5th level. That means that people are dying from hunger and lack of water in North Gaza as well. The situation in South Gaza is not better than what it's in the north of Gaza. Still, we have a shortage in a lot of humanitarian aid, and shortage of food and clean water, and even for tents for the people. And we are entering now the winter season in Gaza. Yesterday, a lot of tents was blown by the wind in Gaza, letting people without even a roof above their heads. So I think that still we are very far away from putting a plan of implementing Gaza and putting plans for that, because still the Israeli military attacking everywhere in Gaza, and there is no like safe place or area that we can start these aids from it, and we can manage to have these aids in these areas.
Okay, Ms. Abdelrazak, the UN suggests it could take up to 350 years to rebuild Gaza's economy to pre-war levels. How do we foresee the post-war Gaza in terms of rebuilding the damaged city? The damage is quite big, almost 80%, isn't it?
Yes, I think the intention is again to completely destroy Gaza, but I think one has to remember that, Palestinians, if we were free and we were given, sovereignty over our land, we could make this a paradise. I mean, there was a lot of hope, if you remember, back in the days, like back before the occupation, or even before Oslo, like there was, economic activities. Like Gazans are very, business-oriented people, very resilient. We're not a people begging for food. We're not a people, starving and dying in front of cameras. This is not who we are. This is what the genocide and what Israel forced us to become. This is dehumanization. The process of dehumanizing Palestinians is to prevent us from, our own agency, from the possibility for us to decide for ourselves. So the reconstruction will happen. It has to be in the hands of the Palestinians. This is very important because why? The US, Israel, the UAE, and other countries are trying to control what will happen next. They will try to control who takes decisions. Israel is very clear that it intends to recolonize and build settlements inside Gaza. And it's clear that the US has an interest in controlling also what comes in and out, just like they would make, Gaza another military base of theirs in the Middle East. And I think this is really what we want to prevent from happening. It has to be like the Palestinian leadership, a Palestinian unified leadership that takes simply the reconstruction of Gaza in their own hands, because we are resourceful. We're not, we're forced to become a humanitarian crisis. But this is a man-made humanitarian crisis. This is not a natural or a fateful, plight for our people, for our region. And I think it's important to remind it, because a lot of people continue to see us in that lens as a humanitarian crisis, which is not the case.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time. There's a lot to talk about, but we're out of time for this episode. I'm sure we're going to have you on again. That was Ratiba Natshi, a member of the Palestinian National Action Committee, and Ines Abdelrazak, co-director of the Palestine Institute for Public Diplomacy from Occupied Jerusalem. Thank you both for sharing your insights with us today. That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Stay tuned for more exclusive stories here on Q News. Thank you for watching. I'm Rehan Morsi.